They didn't even save me a seat at my own grandmother's funeral. No one asked me to speak. No one looked my way. To them, I was invisible. Just the quiet girl who never posted selfies or bragged about family dinners. But when the lawyer opened Grandma's will, the entire room froze, because everything they thought they knew crumbled in one sentence. If you've ever felt overlooked by your own family, this story will speak to your soul. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Your support means more than you know. My name is Lily, and if you ask anyone in my family about me, they'll probably say, "Oh, she's nice, I guess. Quiet, keeps to herself." That's exactly how I've always been quiet. Not because I don't care, but because in my family, noise equals attention, and attention equals power. I never cared for either. I'm 34 now, single by choice, and living in a modest rental house 2 towns away from where I grew up. I work as a librarian, not the glamorous rom-com kind, but the real-life kind who sorts returns, manages toddler story time, and gets yelled at when someone's Wi-Fi doesn't work. But I loved my job. I loved the quiet. And most of all, I loved my grandmother. Grandma June was the only person who ever really saw me. She used to call me her gentle sunflower. She said I didn't need to shout to be strong, that I bloomed best in silence. And she was right. As she got older, her health declined. My aunts and uncles' cousins, they all made big Facebook posts when she turned 80. "Love you so much, Grandma, family first." You know the kind. But when it came time to show up when she needed someone to help her bathe, change her linens, remind her to take her pills, everyone disappeared. Everyone except me. I visited Grandma almost every day. I brought groceries, trimmed her nails, helped her with crossword puzzles, even when I knew she'd fall asleep halfway through. I didn't document it. I didn't take selfies with her. I didn't post a single thing online. It wasn't for show. It was love. And because I was the only one around, I got to know her in ways no one else did. Her fears, her regrets, her favorite songs when she was a girl. The stories she'd never told anyone, not even her own children. She had been through so much. Losing Grandpa young, raising 3 kids on her own, working in a diner until her knees gave out. And yet, she never complained. She found joy in the little things, a good book, warm soup, or simply watching birds outside her window. The house she lived in was the same house I used to run through barefoot as a child. Every creaking floorboard held a memory. The kitchen still smelled faintly of her apple pie. The living room, dimly lit with crocheted doilies on every surface, was where she told me stories that felt like lullabies. That house wasn't just walls, it was her heart. And when she passed away, something inside me cracked. Not just because she was gone, but because I knew what was coming. The rest of the family. Grandma had 3 children, my mother and her 2 brothers, and a whole slew of grandchildren, most of whom I hadn't seen in years. We were scattered across the country, connected only by a family group chat that mostly sat silent unless someone got married or divorced. Growing up, I was the cousin who never got invited to the big beach trips, never had the trendy clothes or flashy boyfriends. I was the one who brought handmade gifts to Christmas when everyone else gave gift cards. I didn't care then. I don't care now. But when word of Grandma's death spread suddenly, everyone came crawling back, crying, reminiscing, calling her the soul of the family. I wanted to believe they meant it. But deep down, I knew most of them weren't mourning Grandma. They were eyeing the house, the land, her savings, because Grandma's property was worth something now. The town had changed, more people moving and real estate prices rising. The house that once seemed old and cramped was now prime real estate, and people noticed. So when funeral plans began and I offered to help, I was ignored. I asked if I could say a few words. They said the schedule was already full. I offered to bring a photo board of Grandma's life. They told me my taste was too plain. I wasn't shocked. I'd been invisible to them my whole life, but I never expected they'd forget me that completely. The day of the funeral was bitterly cold, as if the sky itself was mourning. I arrived early, like I always did, dressed in a plain black dress, hair pulled back, no makeup. Just how Grandma would have liked it. She never cared for fuss, as she called it. The church was already buzzing with voices. I recognized them all, cousins I hadn't seen in years, aunts who used to call me weird uncles, who once forgot my name at a reunion. Now, they were all here, dressed to the nines, laughing softly, greeting each other with warm embraces. No one looked in my direction. I stood near the entrance for a while, clutching the small bouquet I had picked from Grandma's garden just days before she passed. The last roses of the season, her favorites. After a while, I walked toward the pews to find a seat, but every spot near the front was already saved. Purses, coats, scarves, every row carefully blocked off. One of my cousins, Rachel, waved me off without even making eye contact. "These are for immediate family," she said. I wanted to say, "I am immediate family," but I didn't. I just nodded and found a seat in the very back, alone. The service began with an opening hymn and a few Bible verses. Then came the eulogies. First, my Uncle Dave, a man who hadn't visited Grandma in years, spoke tearfully about all the Sundays they used to spend together. I blinked hard. Grandma once told me she hadn't seen him in 5 Christmases. Next was Aunt Sharon. Her voice trembled as she said Grandma was the glue of this family and how much she meant to all of us. I remembered how Grandma cried when Sharon skipped her 85th birthday with no explanation. Then came the cousins Tyler, Rachel, even smug old Jake, each one stepping up, sharing flowery memories that sounded like they were pulled straight from a Hallmark movie. None of them had been there when Grandma fell and fractured her hip. None of them knew her favorite breakfast was buttered toast with cinnamon. None of them had ever seen her cry over a forgotten wedding anniversary. And me, no one called my name. No one asked me to speak. I had prepared a short message, tucked it into my purse just in case. Nothing fancy, just a few words about her garden, the time she stayed up all night knitting me a scarf, the stories she used to tell about her childhood dog. I wanted to honor her, as she really was not the sanitized version my family pretended to know. But my name was never mentioned. After the service, people spilled out into the hallway laughing, catching up like it was a high school reunion. The word grief didn't seem to exist in their vocabulary, and then, of course, came the whispers. I wonder what she left behind. Someone said she had stocks. Oh, that house has to be worth 6 figures now. I bet she split it all between the kids. I stood in the corner, listening invisible as always. When I tried to speak to my mother, she barely made eye contact. She was too busy bragging to her brother about how close she and Grandma were. I wanted to scream. I wanted to say, "You didn't even visit her when she got pneumonia last winter." But I held it in. because what would be the point? They'd already decided I wasn't one of them, that I had no voice, no place, no claim. Later at the post-funeral gathering in the church hall, things got worse. I sat at a table by myself, sipping cold coffee. No one joined me. Everyone else was crowded around the dessert table, talking about trips they wanted to take with their share of the inheritance. One cousin joked, "If there's a God, Grandma left me that antique cabinet. I always loved it." Another added, "Please, you haven't even been to that house in years. Neither have you someone shot back. But she always liked me best." The room erupted in laughter. That's when I realized this wasn't grief. This was greed wrapped in Sunday clothes. They weren't mourning her. They were circling like vultures. And in that moment, something inside me began to shift. Not anger exactly, just a deep, aching sadness. The kind you feel when you realize you were never really part of something you thought you belonged to. I didn't cry, not there. I just sat quietly holding the little note I had written for Grandma, still unread, still tucked away. Until finally, someone tapped a glass and said, "Let's all remember, Grandma loved us all equally." Everyone nodded, smiling, and I just stared down at my lap, wondering how people could lie so beautifully, with straight faces and full mouths. After the reception, the family gathered once more, this time at Grandma's house. They didn't even ask if I'd be there. They just assumed I wouldn't, or worse, that I wouldn't matter. But I came anyway. The moment I stepped through the doorway, it hit me hard. The smell of cinnamon soap, the creak of the wood floors, the photos still hanging on the walls. It was like she might turn the corner at any minute, humming some old country song asking if I wanted tea. But she didn't. Instead, the living room was packed with people rifling through her things. Oh my God, this vase is antique, right? Is this her wedding ring? I want it. Didn't she have a coin collection or something? It wasn't even subtle. No one was mourning anymore. They were looting. I stood near the doorway, frozen. No one noticed me. Or maybe they did, and just didn't care. I saw Aunt Sharon holding up one of Grandma's old scarves and making a face. "Smells like mothballs," she said, laughing. That scarf was hand-knitted by Grandma during the winter she got shingles. I remember sitting by her bed, rubbing lotion on her arms while she worked on it. They didn't know. They never would. My cousin Rachel spotted me eventually. She walked over, arms crossed, lips tight. "You okay?" she asked, like she didn't care either way. I nodded. "You know," she added casually, "just so you're aware, the lawyer will be here in an hour. To read the will?" I blinked. "The will? Yeah. You can stay if you want. Not sure there's anything in it for you, though." She said it with such practiced cruelty, like she knew it would sting, but also didn't think I had the right to be hurt. "I was with her," I said quietly. She shrugged. "We all loved her." No, they loved the idea of her, the image. Not the woman who cried when her knees locked up. Not the woman who needed help going to the bathroom. Not the woman who once whispered to me, "Sometimes I wonder if anyone remembers the real me." I did. I remembered. I made my way into the kitchen just to breathe. But even there, more vultures. Tyler was going through the spice cabinet. "Did you know saffron's like really expensive?" he said, holding up a nearly empty jar. I wanted to scream. I wanted to yell at them to stop, to feel something, anything. But I didn't. I sat down at the little breakfast nook where Grandma and I used to have tea. The seat was still warm from someone else's body. There was no space for me anymore, and that's when it happened. Someone turned on the TV. I heard the familiar intro of some afternoon game show, loud clashing wildly, inappropriate, and my chest just broke. In the middle of this sacred space, in the middle of her home, while her spirit was still clinging to the air. They were watching Wheel of Fortune. I stood up and said, "Can we maybe turn that off? Just for a little while?" Jake, the smug one, looked at me and rolled his eyes. "Geez, Lily, relax. It's just background noise." "Not here," I said, voice shaking. "This was her home," he scoffed. "Yeah, well, not anymore." And that was it, the final cut. I walked outside into the cold afternoon and sat on the porch swing. That swing had always been our place, me and Grandma. She'd hold my hand there when I was little, teaching me the names of the birds. She once told me that swing helped her feel young again. Now, I sat there alone, hands clenched in my lap, trying to hold back tears. They had erased me. From the family, from the funeral, from her memory. As if I had never existed in her life at all. The only person who had ever seen me was gone, and the people left behind didn't even want me in the room. But I stayed. I stayed on that porch swing, watching them move through the house like it was a department store clearance sale. I stayed while the sun dipped lower, painting everything gold, like Grandma's favorite light. And when the lawyer arrived, sharp suit leather briefcase, the kind of man who spoke in clauses, I stood up, wiped my cheeks, and walked inside. I didn't know what was coming, but something deep in my bones whispered, "Don't leave yet." The lawyer cleared his throat. Everyone shuffled into the living room like school children before a substitute teacher. Gone were the jokes, the fake tears, the snide remarks. Now they were silent, expectant, greedy. I stood by the doorway, unsure if I was even supposed to be there. The lawyer, Mrs. Gerster, Hanley, pulled out a thick manila folder from his briefcase and adjusted his glasses. "My name is James Hanley," he began, "and I was your grandmother's legal representative for the last 13 years. I was also her friend." There was a pause. A few people exchanged glances, clearly surprised by that last bit. She left a final testament dated 3 months ago. It was updated in full mental and physical capacity, and witnessed properly. I will read it aloud now. He unfolded the first page. The air felt tight. "To my family. If you're hearing this, I've finally joined Harold in heaven. I'm sure some of you are only here to see what I've left behind. That's fine. I've known for a long time who's shown up for me and who hasn't." A few people shifted uncomfortably. Rachel bit her lip. Tyler raised an eyebrow. "I've watched many of you come and go. Some more go than come. You smiled in pictures and sent birthday cards once a year, but I've had enough lonely Christmases to know who truly cares." Mr. Hanley flipped it to the next page. "To my children, Sharon and Dave. Dave, you each will receive $1,000. Not because I didn't love you, but because you stopped visiting me after 2017. I kept track. You were busy. I get it. So was I, dying slowly." Gasps filled the room. Aunt Sharon's face turned crimson. Uncle Dave opened his mouth as if to protest, but the lawyer didn't stop. "To my grandchildren, Rachel, Tyler, Jake, and the rest, you all brought me moments of joy when you were young. But somewhere along the way, you stopped calling, stopped caring. Some of you were more interested in my jewelry than my health. You each will receive $500. I hope you use it on something meaningful and not a new phone." Someone let out a small, stunned laugh. It died instantly. As for the house, the land, the savings, my investments, and what's left of my heart, I leave it all to Lily Rose Caldwell. Silence. Complete, breathless silence. Lily, my quiet loyal. Lily, you were the only one who stayed. You showed up when no one else did. You never posted selfies with me to get likes. You never asked for anything. You just loved me, and I saw it. Every time you tucked me in, every time you brought me tea, every time you sat with me when I couldn't sleep. My breath caught. I felt the room spinning. You're the only one who never needed to be seen to make me feel visible. That's a rare kind of love. That's the kind that deserves something real. So everything I have, is yours now. I didn't move. I didn't breathe. I didn't even feel joy, just stunned, hollow disbelief. Mr. Hanley folded the letter, then looked up. There are also some personal items in a sealed box that she left specifically for Lily. I'll deliver them separately. And that was it. No one spoke for a full minute. You could hear a pin drop or a heart shatter. Then came the sound I dreaded, Rachel's voice. This has to be a mistake. Mr. Hanley raised an eyebrow. Excuse me. She must have been confused. Grandma wouldn't do this. She loved all of us. She did, I said softly. But she also remembered. Jake stood up, pointing at me. You manipulated her. You took advantage of her in her old age. I shook my head. I changed her bandages when no one else showed up. I took her to every doctor's appointment. I was there when she cried herself to sleep. If that's manipulation, then maybe you should have been the one doing it, Tyler scoffed. She was old. You could have told her anything. Mr. Hanley's voice cut in firm final. I assure you, her mental capacity was reviewed thoroughly. This was her wish. It is legally binding. If anyone wants to contest it, you're welcome to waste your money. That shut them up. They stared at me now, not with disgust, but with fear. And maybe, just maybe, with guilt. But I didn't gloat. I didn't smile. I didn't say I told you so. I just stood there holding back tears as the woman I loved most in the world protected me even in death. She hadn't forgotten me. She had seen me when no one else did, and now they had to live with that. I didn't move right away after the will was read. I stood still in the doorway, my pulse pounding in my ears, while everyone else struggled to process what had just happened. No shouting, no fists slamming on tables, no accusations thrown in my face. Just stunned silence. And that was the most powerful revenge I could have asked for. Not because they were hurt, but because they finally had to sit in the emptiness they'd created without excuses. I left the house quietly that day while the others were still debating whether the lawyer had doctored the will, or if they could somehow file a claim to reverse it. I didn't say goodbye. They wouldn't have noticed anyway. A week later, I moved into Grandma's house. It still smelled like her lavender and peppermint oil. Her Afghan was still draped over the sofa, her slippers tucked neatly beneath her rocking chair. I left everything as it was, for days walking through the rooms like I was visiting her memory. The letter she wrote me, I read it every night before bed. Lily, you never asked me for anything. That's why I wanted to give you everything. You've earned it with every quiet act of love. I'm so proud of the woman you are. I didn't block my relatives. I didn't make a grand social media post about getting what I deserved. I didn't even tell my coworkers what happened. But the news traveled. First, it was Rachel texting me a long, fake sweet message asking if we could talk sometime. Then it was Uncle Dave calling to say he was surprised but happy for me, followed by a not so subtle request to borrow money for a business opportunity. I didn't reply to any of them, not out of bitterness, but because their words now felt like knockoff versions of love, cheap and manufactured. But karma doesn't always come with thunder. Sometimes it comes as silence. A few weeks later, I did something unexpected. I hired a landscape team to restore Grandma's neglected garden, her pride and joy. I didn't do it for attention. I did it because she'd always said, "When I pass, I want my roses to keep blooming. I want the birds to keep coming." And so they did. Neighbors began stopping by, marveling at how alive the place felt again. They'd smile, hand me cookies, or tell me stories about Grandma I'd never heard before. She always made sure to check on me after my surgery. Said Mrs. Halpern from across the street. "Your grandma taught my daughter how to crochet," said Martinez. "Wouldn't take a dime." Turns out she was loved, deeply, just not by the ones who shared her blood. Then came the day that proved karma didn't just arrive, it lingered. Rachel showed up on my doorstep. Hair perfectly curled, makeup flawless, but her eyes didn't match. They looked desperate. I've been thinking she started clutching her purse too tightly. About everything. About how we acted. I didn't say a word. I was young, self-absorbed. Grandma always said I was stubborn. Maybe she was right. Still, I said nothing. She took a shaky breath. "Look, you got the house, the money. You won. Okay. But can we move on? Can we pretend like it didn't end this way?" I tilted my head. "Did it end?" I asked gently, or did the truth finally begin? Her eyes welled with tears. "Real? I wasn't sure." "Do you hate me?" she whispered. I looked past her to the roses in bloom behind the fence. "No," I said softly. "That would mean I still expected more from you." Rachel left, quietly, the way I used to. But I didn't stop there. I turned Grandma's house into something new, a quiet sanctuary for women who had no one. I converted the guest bedroom into a reading nook and the basement into a cozy art studio. I started hosting small circles, grief counseling, creative writing for seniors, even a monthly tea for the elderly in the neighborhood. One day, as I poured tea for Mrs. Bennett, she looked at me and said, "Your grandmother would be so proud, not because you inherited her house, but because you inherited her heart." And that was it. That was the moment I realized this was the real inheritance. Not money, not property, but purpose. The others, they faded out of my life slowly and bitterly. Jake tried to start a GoFundMe after claiming he'd been disinherited unjustly. It got flagged for fraud. Aunt Sharon tried to get an interview on a local radio station to tell her side of the story. It got canceled when the host found out the will had been signed and notarized with 3 legal witnesses. One by one, their noise collapsed into silence. And me, I finally had peace. Not the loud, dramatic kind, but the kind that settles deep in your bones. The kind that whispers, "You did right," even when no one saw you. Lily never raised her voice. She never lashed out. She never even planned revenge. But her love, her patience, and her dignity became the loudest karma of all. It was a quiet Sunday afternoon. The roses were in bloom. The kettle whistled gently in the kitchen. I sat by the window with a cup of chamomile tea. Grandma's last handwritten letter resting in my lap, the one she asked the lawyer to deliver after the will had been read. I opened it with steady hands. My Lily, I know this letter will reach you when the noise has died down, when the ones who made you feel invisible have gone quiet. I want you to know, I saw you every visit, every tear you held in so others wouldn't feel uncomfortable. Every moment you chose kindness over credit. You never needed a spotlight because you carried your own light. I leave you this home not just as bricks and walls, but as a reminder that real love doesn't shout, it shows up and it stays. Thank you for staying, love, Grandma. I pressed the paper to my heart, tears slipping down my cheeks, not from grief, but from release. I wasn't invisible anymore, not because of the will, not because of the house, but because someone who mattered had seen me all along. I folded the letter carefully, placed it in a small frame, and set it on the mantel. Then I whispered into the stillness, as if she could still hear me. Love doesn't need an audience. It just needs to be real. And in that moment, I knew I hadn't just inherited her house. I had inherited her quiet strength. And that truly was the most powerful legacy of all.